Bonjour, Kinamagi, Nene, Ireland, and Dishnikas, and welcome to this production of Social Studies Explorer. Today's lesson, Chapter 4, Lesson 9, Slave Life in America. We'll begin today's episode using the textbook, and we'll conclude with an example of one of the songs. More on that later. If someone asked you to describe the life of an enslaved person, what would you say? In your head, think of a few characteristics that you think describe their lives. As you read this section, compare the lives of slaves in the southern colonies with those in the northern and middle colonies. How are their lives similar or different? You may use a Venn diagram to help you with this. In the modern age, we know how terrible slavery is. As you read, try to decide why the South moved toward the institution of slavery. Slave life in the South. The life of a Southern slave is likely what you described in the introduction paragraph. Slaves in the colonies were of African descent. A similarity between Northern and Southern slaves is that there were some slaves that worked on small farms or in the cities. However, the majority of Southern slaves lived and worked on plantations. Remember, plantations are a special type of farm where specialty crops are grown by resident labor, slaves in this case. These large plantations held hundreds of slaves. Plantation life was very difficult. Slave owners in the South knew the slaves were the key to their plantation surviving and for them to make money. Because of this, they often forced the slaves to work long hours. Some slave owners even admitted to making their slaves work by candle and moonlight. Some slaves came to America with special skills because of where they grew up. Remember, slaves came from one of 8 primary locations in Africa. Based on that location, a slave could have a special skill to contribute to the plantation. For example, some slaves from West Africa were skilled at growing rice, since they grew in their home villages. These slaves were specifically used to help build the rice production of the Carolinas along the Atlantic coast. No matter what skills they had when they came to the colonies, slaves were immediately put to work. Due to the harsh lifestyle of the plantations, enslaved people in the South had no say about keeping their families together. Mothers and their children could be sold to different owners. Slave owners also had the right to sell a slave at any time. It often happened that slave owners would sell the children of slaves to make some extra money. This was very hard on Southern slaves. Despite, or maybe because of, their hard lives, Southern slaves did their best to maintain their African culture. They would reconstruct instruments they would have had in Africa, like banjos and drums. Their African heritage became infused into colonial ways of life. For example, the colonists tried to force the slaves to adopt Christianity. The slaves didn't have a lot of choice in the matter, but their African songs, dances, and customs became part of their religious practices. You may at this point see some similarities to what we had to experience through boarding schools here with the forcing of religion. Life in the northern and middle colonies. In total, the New England colonies had about 15,000 enslaved persons. The life of slaves in the northern and middle colonies are most likely not the kind of life you described above. They were from Africa, but their working life was different from their southern counterparts. While some slaves in this area worked on farms, the majority of them did not. The middle and New England colonies had harsher winters than the southern colonies, and nobody could work in the fields year-round. So there was some variety in their work schedules. Many worked in stores, inns, and as skilled laborers. They also worked in people's homes as cooks and personal servants. Slaves in these two regions also had occasional chances to improve their lives. For example, slaves in this area sometimes had the opportunity to earn extra money by working extra jobs at night and on weekends. On occasion, an enslaved person could earn enough money to buy his own freedom. While slaves in the northern and middle colonies did often have more freedom than southern slaves, Their lives were not easy. Colonies passed very strict laws that severely limited their movement. For example, in this area, they were not allowed to travel or go on boats without written permission from their owners. These laws were intended to make it very difficult for slaves to escape. And in this, as this unit goes on, you're going to hear about some more details of slave life and how they managed or engaged and tried to escape. The final activity today says, with the help of your teacher, search on YouTube for slave work songs. Being we're not personally in the classroom, I picked one here for us, Swing Low Sweet Chariot, which was one I was familiar with. It's been sung and by many different artists, and it was a good choice for one that you probably will hear again. So I'm going to go ahead and play that song for you as our final aspect of class today.
Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Coming forth to carry me home. A band of angels coming after me, coming forth to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. If you get there before I do, coming forth to carry me home. Tell all my friends I'm not coming too, coming forth to carry me home. Why don't you swing down, chariot, stop and let me ride? Swing down, chariot, stop and let me ride. Oh, rock me, Lord, rock me, Lord. Come and ease it. I got home on the other side. Swing down, chariot, stop and let me ride. Swing down, chariot, stop and let me ride. Oh, rock me, Lord, rock me, Lord. Come and ease it. I got home on the other side. Why don't you swing down, chariot, stop and let me ride. Stop and let me ride. Oh, rock me, Lord, rock me, Lord. Come and ease it. I got home on the other side. Woo. Yeah.
We have now reached the conclusion of this video segment. This was only a small piece of information about slave life in America. There is a lot more reading to do and learning to be had. But for today, please return to the Google Classroom for a brief assignment. I hope you all have a Minogizhigad, and meanwhile, Bama P.